The observation deck overlooks the east corridor through reinforced glass. The monitors glow with thermal feeds, motion sensors, temp overlays, all the mechanical eyes that guard the household when human attention fails. Guard Commander James Whitmore sits in the leather chair, the same he has occupied for 7 years at this hour. 3:47 a.m. The palace sleeps. The night staff moves through their rotations like blood through a body necessary, predictable, invisible once you know the pattern. He moves the cursor across the main feed. The east wing shows nothing. The garden court shows nothing. The secondary stairwell shows nothing. This is what norm looks like at this hour. This is what Whitmore expects to see. Then the cursor stops on the wine cellar access point. The door is open. Not slightly ajar. Open. Perhaps 6 inches, enough that the interior darkness bleeds into the corridor light. Whitmore leans forward. The thermal overlay shows no heat signature beyond the threshold, only the steady blue glow of refrigerated storage and regulated climate. He checks the timestamp. The feed is live. This is happening now. He pulls up the access log for the cellar on the secondary monitor. The interface takes 3 seconds to load. 7 years of routine have taught him that 3 seconds is as an eternity when something is wrong. The last logged entry reads, Wine Cellar Access, 6:32, 21 Feb. Household Manager Wells. Duration, 10 minutes. Whitmore checks today's date. 22. The entry is from yesterday afternoon. The door has been locked since Wells left it. The system is clear on this. The automated lock engages at midnight. No exceptions. But the door in the feed is open. Whitmore's hand hovers over the desk phone. Protocol is clear. Irregularities are reported to the head of household security, who notifies the duty officer, who convenes response procedures. This takes 15 minutes minimum. By then, the incident is documented, logged, and filed into the institutional machinery where it will be examined, sanitized, and eventually forgotten as a sensor malfunction or a log error or an employee mistake. Whitmore has filed hundreds of reports like this. Most of them were mistakes. He replays the cellar feed in reverse. 3:30 a.m. door closed. Closed. 1:15 a.m. door closed. 23:47, just before the auto-lock door closed and locked. The timestamp confirms it. The door was secure when the night watch shifted to minimal status. Somewhere between midnight and 3:47 a.m., someone opened it. Whitmore checks the motion sensor log for the cellar corridor. The digital timestamp shows no motion detected. Window 32 to 3:45. This is impossible. Someone had to walk to that door, had to unlock it, had to open it. The motion sensors would have registered the approach, the presence, the exit. They are ultra-sensitive. They trigger on-air currents from the HVAC system. Yet they show nothing. Runs the log again. Nothing. He should call the head of household security now. He should document this anomaly and let the day shift handle it. A sensor malfunction is a maintenance issue, not a crisis. The palace operates on the assumption that procedures to contingency complications. Whitmore's job is to follow those procedures, not circumvent them. But something in the feed keeps his hand on the desk instead of the phone. 7 years at this post. 7 watching the palace breathe in through the day shift, through the night. 7 years of learning what normal looks like. 7 years of knowing when something is wrong. The door should not be open. Whitmore stands. He does not call the head of household security. He does not fill out a preliminary incident report. He leaves the observation deck and walks to the east corridor stairwell. His ID badge swipes the cellar access panel with a soft click. The door to the lower level opens without resistance. The stairs descend into shadow. Control hums below. The air grows colder with each step down, and Whitmore can feel the temperature drop in his sinuses, that sharp, clean sensation of moving from a heated space into refrigeration. At the base of the stairs, the wine cellar corridor stretches ahead. The emergency lighting casts everything in a dull blue glow. The door to the main storage rooms at the far end, maybe 40 feet away. Whitmore can see it clearly from here. It is still open. He walks toward it, his footsteps careful and deliberate. The corridor is silent except for the ambient hum of the cooling system. No voices, no movement, no sign of life. Nothing that should be here, except the open door. The journey upstairs seems to take longer than it should. Whitmore moves carefully, one hand supporting Charlotte's weight, his footsteps measured to avoid jolting her. The cold has made her body rigid and uncoordinated, her legs function, but without the fluid automaticity of a child who has been moving freely. She has been stationary for hours. The reacclimation to movement is physical trauma in its own right. At the top of the stairs, the warmth of the upper levels hits them both. Charlotte shivers more intensely, not from cold now, but from the shock of temperature change. Whitmore keeps moving. The infirmary is on this floor, east corridor, past the observation deck, where he was sitting less than 20 minutes ago. No one is in the corridors at 4:03 a.m. The NAF is elsewhere, completing their rotations in areas designated for maintenance and security sweeps. The palace's interior spaces belong to no one at this hour. They are transitional zones, spaces of passage rather than habitation. Whitmore reaches the infirmary door and uses his security clearance to enter. The lights are low automated to a soft, ambient level when no one is present. He does not turn them higher. Instead, he guides Charlotte to the examination bed and helps her sit. "I am going to get the night medical officer," he says. "Will you wait here?" Charlotte nods. She is no longer trembling as violently. The warmth is helping. Her eyes are tracking him, processing his movements, the instinctive behavior of someone trying to ensure the person helping them does not disappear. The night medical officer, Dr. Sarah Chen, is in the adjacent office, completing reports. She looks up when Whitmore enters. The expression on her face changes immediately, reading something in his posture or his tone before he speaks. "Princess Charlotte has been locked in the wine cellar storage room," Whitmore says. His voice remains calm, but the words themselves are incendiary. "She has been there for an unknown duration, exposure to cold, but she appears physically intact. I need you to assess her." Dr. Chen does not ask for clarification. She moves immediately, following him into the examination room where Charlotte sits on the bed, wrapped in Whitmore's jacket, her small frame diminished by the oversized fabric. "Hello, Charlotte," Dr. Chen says, and her voice carries the particular warmth that medical professionals develop for frightened patients. "My name is Dr. Chen. I need to check on you and make sure you are okay. Is that all right?" Charlotte nods. Dr. Chen begins the assessment: temperature, pulse, pupil response, the standard battery of checks. Whitmore steps back, positioning himself by the door. His hand rests on his radio. He has not used it yet. He has not reported this discovery to anyone. The moment he does, the institutional machinery will activate. Procedures will engage. Pauls will determine how this situation is categorized, documented, and handled. And somewhere in that machinery, there will be people who do not want this categorized in a particular way. He has 7 years of palace experience. 7 years of understanding how information flows, how incidents are managed, how narratives are constructed. Someone deliberately confined a 9-year-old princess in a refrigerated storage room and locked the door from the outside. This is not an accident. This is not a gone wrong. This is a deliberate act of confinement. And that means someone in the palace knew she was there. Or someone in the palace put her there. "She is going to be fine," Dr. Chen says, completing her assessment. "Mild hypothermia, but nothing severe. Her core temperature is 35.8 degrees Celsius. Slightly low, but within recovery range for a child her age and health status. She needs warmth, fluids, and rest. I would like to keep her here for observation for the next 2 hours, then she can return to her quarters." "Who told you to come down here, Charlotte?" Whitmore asks, his voice gentle but direct. Charlotte looks at Dr. Chen, then back at Whitmore. "Ms. Harrington," she says. "She came to the schoolroom this morning. She said there was a special inspection of the storage areas, and I was needed to help verify the inventory. She said it was important, and that it was a secret project for my parents." Whitmore's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Harrington." "Kate Harrington, the Royal Household Director. Did she go downstairs with you?" Whitmore asks. "She walked me," Charlotte says. "She said I needed to go alone, because it was a test of responsibility. She said to wait in the storage room until she came back. Then the door closed, and it wouldn't open, and it was so cold." She stops. Her eyes begin to water. This time the tears come. Whitmore does not press further. He looks at Dr. Chen, and she nods slightly, a signal that Charlotte should rest, that further questioning can wait. Whitmore moves to the door. "I need to report," he says quietly. "Charlotte will stay with you." "She will," Dr. Chen confirms. Whitmore steps into the corridor. The observation deck is 30 meters away. He walks there and closes the door behind him. The monitors still show the wine corridor, the open storage room door, the empty cot. He has been gone for 11 minutes. In that time, no one has come to close the door. No one has discovered the open access point. No one knows yet that the princess missing from her quarters at 3:47 a.m. He reaches for the desk phone and begins to dial the head of household security. His hand pauses over the keypad. If he reports this through the standard channels, the information flows to the head of household security, who notifies the duty officer, who convenes the incident response team. Somewhere in that chain of command, Kate Harrington will be informed. She will become part of the incident management apparatus. and she will have an opportunity to control the narrative before it solidifies into documented fact. Whitmore lowers the phone. He thinks for a moment. Then he dials a different number, the direct line to the Lord Chamberlain, the highest-ranking official with direct access to the royal family. It rings twice before a voice answers, still groggy but rapidly clarifying. "This is Guard Commander James Whitmore," he says. "There has been a security incident involving Princess Charlotte. You need to be informed immediately." The Lord Chamberlain's office is on the residential floor, one level above the infirmary. By the time Whitmore completes his initial report, facts only, no speculation, the Lord Chamberlain, Sir Michael Rothwell, is already moving through the corridors. He is 73 years old, has served 4 monarchs, and carries himself with the kind of authority that comes from understanding institutional power better than anyone else in the building. "Show me," he says simply. He meets Whitmore at the infirmary entrance. They walk together to the wine cellar. The door remains open, exactly as Whitmore left it. The storage room is still illuminated, the emergency cot still empty. Rothwell moves through the space slowly, observing but not touching anything. He does not ask questions. He simply looks at the cot, at the blanket, at the temperature control panel, showing 8 degrees Celsius, significantly lower than the standard 12 degrees Celsius used for wine preservation. "How long was she down here?" Rothwell asks finally. "Charlotte estimates between 4 and 6 hours, Whitmore says. "She was placed here sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight, based on her memory of the timeline. The access logs show the last recorded entry at 4:32 p.m. yesterday afternoon. And you discovered her at what time?" 3:47 a.m. Rothwell nods slowly. He does not appear shocked, which Whitmore finds noteworthy. Perhaps shock requires surprise, and the Lord Chamberlain is rarely surprised by human behavior within institutional hierarchies. "Dr. Chen has assessed her?" Rothwell asks. "Mild hypothermia. No lasting physical injury expected." "And she identified who instructed her to come down here?" Whitmore hesitates. This is the moment where facts become allegations, where observation becomes accusation. "She stated that Kate Harrington brought her to the cellar door and instructed her to wait in the storage room." Rothwell's expression does not change. He turns and walks toward the exit. "Come with me," he says. They ascend the stairs to the residential floor, and Rothwell leads Whitmore to a secure office adjacent to the main household administration suite. The room is small, lined with filing cabinets and a single desk. Rothwell picks up an internal phone and dials. "I need Kate Harrington in the secure office immediately," he says. "Tell her it is urgent but routine." He hangs up and looks at Whitmore. "You will remain here. You will not speak unless directly addressed. You will document everything I ask you to document. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "And Whitmore, this conversation will be reported through proper channels once I have assessed the situation. But for now, it remains confined to this office." "Understood?" "Understood." Kate Harrington arrives 7 minutes later. She is 58, immaculately dressed even at 4:20 a.m., her gray hair styled precisely. She carries herself with the confidence of someone who has managed the logistics of royal households for 3 decades. When she sees Whitmore, her expression shifts, not dramatically, but noticeably. A brief tightening around the eyes. A pause in her breathing. "Sir Michael," she says, addressing Rothwell with practicality. "I was not expecting to be summoned at this hour. Is there a problem?" "Sit down, Kate," Rothwell says. Harrington sits. Rothwell remains standing behind his desk, which creates a power dynamic that is immediately clear. He is in control, she is being questioned. "Princess Charlotte was found locked in the wine cellar storage room at approximately 3:47 this morning," Rothwell says. His tone is conversational, almost pleasant. "She was placed there, according to her account, by you. She states that you instructed her to enter the storage room and wait. Is this accurate?" Harrington's face does not change, but Whitmore can see her hands tighten slightly on the armrests of her chair. "That is, I can explain that," she says carefully. "Charlotte requested to see the household storage areas. She has been studying inventory management in her education. I arranged a supervised tour. She wanted to examine the wine collection, and I instructed her to wait in the storage room while I retrieved the inventory documentation from my office. I was only gone for a few minutes. I do not understand how she ended up locked inside." "The storage door locks from the outside," Rothwell says. "The access log shows no entry after 32 p.m. yesterday. The motion sensors registered no movement in the cellar corridor after 11:47 p.m. How do you explain this discrepancy?" I do not have an explanation for the sensors," Harrington says. "Perhaps there is a malfunction. As for the door, I may have closed it without realizing it had an automatic lock. I assumed it remained open. When I returned with the documentation, I was called away on another matter. I did not check on Charlotte immediately. You did not check on a 9-year-old child you had placed alone in a locked, refrigerated storage room, Rothwell repeats, his tone still conversational, but with an undertone that suggests he finds this explanation implausible. As I said, I assumed the door was open. I made an error in judgment. Dr. Chin's assessment indicates that Charlotte experienced symptoms consistent with 4 to 6 hours of exposure to cold temperatures, Rothwell says. The thermostat was set 8 degrees Celsius. The standard setting for wine preservation is 12 degrees. Someone deliberately lowered that temperature. Was that you? No, Harrington says. Her voice has become quieter. Absolutely not. I would never. Then who? Rothwell's voice carries an edge now, the first indication that his patience is beginning to fracture. Who has access to the cellar thermostat controls? The thermostat is accessible to anyone with cellar access, Harrington says. It is near the main entrance to the wine storage area. Then anyone could have adjusted it, Rothwell says. And anyone could have locked the door deliberately, intending for Charlotte to remain in that room. Is that your assertion? Harrington does not respond immediately. The silence stretches. Whitmore can see sweat beginning to form on her temples. I want to speak with my legal representation, she says finally. Rothwell nods, as if he has been expecting this response. You will remain in your quarters pending an investigation. You will not leave the palace. You will not communicate with other household staff regarding this incident. Do you understand? Yes, Harrington says quietly. You may go. Whitmore remains in the infirmary corridor for another hour while the investigation machinery begins its slow rotation. More officers arrive. The Lord Chamberlain convenes a preliminary inquiry in one of the administrative offices. The palace's internal security network is activated at elevated status, not yet full lockdown, but close enough that staff movements are now being tracked and recorded. At 6:30 a.m., Whitmore is called to provide his formal statement. The Lord Chamberlain sits across from him in the secure office, accompanied by a legal representative from the palace's internal counsel office. A recording device sits on the desk between them. All statements from this point forward will be documented. Walk me through your discovery, Rothwell says. Start from when you first noticed the irregularity. Whitmore provides the timeline. The open door at 3:47 a.m., the access log showing no entry, the motion sensor showing movement, the decision to investigate personally. He describes the descent into the cellar, the cold air, the rustling sound, the moment he found Charlotte. Why did you not follow standard protocol? Rothwell asks. It is not an accusatory question, simply factual. Why did you not immediately report the irregularity and wait for the incident response team? The anomalies suggested something was actively happening in the cellar, Whitmore says. Standard protocol assumes time for reports to be processed, for teams to be assembled, for procedures to engage. The open door indicated an active breach. The motion sensors showing no entry suggested a sensor malfunction or something already inside the cellar that should not be there. I judged that immediate investigation was more appropriate than protocol delay. And you were correct, Rothwell says. Your instinct prevented what could have been a catastrophic outcome. However, your deviation from protocol creates a complication. He pauses, allowing the weight of this statement to settle. Kate Harrington's legal representation will argue that the investigation was compromised by your unauthorized entry into a restricted area, your failure to secure the scene before conducting an assessment, and your presence as a contaminating factor in the evidentiary chain. Rothwell continues. They will claim that anything you discovered cannot be reliably attributed to intentional action by their client, because the scene was not secured by protocol-compliant procedures. Whitmore understands what this means. His instinct to save Charlotte has potentially created a legal vulnerability in prosecuting the person who confined her. What do you recommend? Whitmore asks. I recommend that you document exactly what you discovered, exactly what you observed, and exactly what Charlotte stated to you during your initial interaction, Rothwell says. Without embellishment, without inference, without narrative construction. Factual observation only. That statement will be held by the palace's legal counsel and will be available for use in any formal investigation or legal proceeding. It will carry weight because it was provided at the earliest, before any institutional narrative could be constructed. Understood, Whitmore says. There is something else, Rothwell continues. In approximately 1 hour, the king will convene a meeting with senior household staff. Kate Harrington will likely present, representing her position as household director pending the outcome of the investigation. The palace narrative, the story that will be told to external parties, to the press, to Parliament will be constructed during that meeting. You should be aware that there will be significant pressure to minimize this incident, to characterize it as a regrettable misunderstanding rather than a deliberate act of child endangerment. Why would there be such pressure? Whitmore asks, though he already knows the answer. Because Kate Harrington has served the household for 30 years, Rothwell says. Because she has relationships with multiple senior officials, including members of Parliament and the judicial system. Because a full investigation into her actions might reveal other incidents, other patterns, other complications that the institution prefers to keep contained. And because, frankly, the royal family does not want this story to become public. A member of the household staff deliberately confining a child, especially a child of royal family, is exactly the kind of scandal that erodes public confidence in institutional competence. Rothwell leans back in his chair. I am telling you this because you are now a key witness, and you should understand that institutional pressure will likely be applied to you in various forms. You may be asked to reconsider details of your statement. You may be offered incentives, commendations, advancement, transfers to more desirable postings to characterize this incident as less serious than it is. You may also face consequences if you do not cooperate with the institutional narrative. I understand, Whitmore says. Do you? Rothwell asks. It is not rhetorical. Because if you do not, you should leave now, before you become further entangled in this process. Once you provide your formal statement, your position becomes public record. You cannot unsay what you will say. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Whitmore thinks about Charlotte in the infirmary, wrapped in a thermal blanket, drinking warm tea. He thinks about the thermostat deliberately lowered to 8 degrees Celsius. He thinks about the locked door, the hours of cold and darkness, the particular vulnerability of a 9-year-old child who had been told to wait for an adult who never returned. I wish to proceed, he says. The morning briefing is scheduled for 8 a.m. in the main household administration conference room. By 7:45 a.m., Whitmore has completed his formal statement, signed the documentation, and returned to his regular duties. The pretense of normalcy is part of the institutional machinery, no disruption to the visible operation, all complications resolved in secure offices, away from the public view of the palace staff. He is stationed at the corridor access point outside the conference room when Kate Harrington arrives. She is dressed impeccably, as always, navy suit, pearls, hair in its precise style. Her legal representative walks beside her, a woman Whitmore does not recognize. They pass through the access point without acknowledging Whitmore, though he notes Harrington's eyes flick toward him briefly, assessing his expression, his demeanor, his potential as either an adversary or a manageable variable. Inside the conference room, the king and queen sit at the head of the table. The Lord Chamberlain, the head of household security, the palace's internal council representative, and the chief administrative officers are arranged around the table. Charlotte is not present. She is still in the infirmary, under medical observation and protected from this proceeding. Whitmore cannot hear the conversation inside, but he can track the duration. The meeting lasts 43 minutes. During that time, Whitmore observes the staff movements in the corridors around him. Some officers move with increased urgency. Some move more slowly, their movements deliberate and cautious. The institutional machinery is recalibrating, adjusting, preparing for a particular outcome. When the conference room doors open, the first person to emerge is Richard Ashford, the head of household security. He looks directly at Whitmore. Come with me, he says. They walk to Ashford's office, a space that Whitmore has been to only twice in his 7 years of service. Once for a performance review, once for a commendation ceremony. Ashford closes the door and sits behind his desk. The household has decided to conduct an internal investigation into the incident involving Princess Charlotte, Ashford says. His tone is careful, measured. This investigation will be thorough and will document all relevant facts. However, there are certain sensitivities involved that require careful handling. What sensitivities? Whitmore asks, though he already knows the answer. Kate Harrington is claiming that Charlotte entered the cellar without authorization, Ashford says. That Harrington did not place her there deliberately. That Charlotte may have been conducting an unauthorized exploration of the palace, something that does happen occasionally with the royal children, and that Harrington discovered her and locked her in to prevent her from wandering further into restricted areas. Whitmore says nothing. The claim is absurd. Charlotte's own testimony directly contradicts this narrative. But he understands what is happening, the institutional reframing of events, the reconstruction of narrative to serve institutional interests rather than factual accuracy. Charlotte's statement to you indicated that Harrington brought her to the cellar and instructed her to enter the storeroom, Ashford continues. That is what Charlotte stated, Whitmore confirms. Those were her words. Mrs. Harrington came to the schoolroom. She said there was a special inspection. And you documented this statement? Ashford asks. I provided a full account to the Lord Chamberlain, which was recorded. Yes, I am aware, Ashford says. The question is whether you are certain of those exact words, or whether you are recalling a paraphrase of what Charlotte said. Memory can be unreliable in high-stress situations. Officers sometimes reconstruct events in ways that feel accurate but contain subtle inaccuracies. Whitmore recognizes this tactic. It is the beginning of the institutional pressure Rothwell warned him about. The suggestion that his memory might be flawed, that his interpretation might be influenced by emotional response to finding a child in danger, that his account might be subjectively unreliable. My account was documented immediately after the discovery, Whitmore says carefully, while memory was fresh and accurate. Of course, says. However, the internal investigation would benefit from a more detailed analysis. We would like you to provide a supplementary statement that explores alternative interpretations of what Charlotte said. For instance, could she have been describing a planned tour that was supposed to remain open but accidentally got locked? Could she have misremembered or misinterpreted Harrington's instructions? That is not what occurred, Whitmore says. Charlotte was deliberately confined and left in cold conditions for hours. Ashford's expression does not change. I understand that is your interpretation, he says. But interpretation is different from documented fact. The Household's Counsel has indicated that a more nuanced statement, one acknowledges the ambiguity in the situation and the possibility of alternative explanations, would be valuable for a thorough investigation. Whitmore understands what this means. If he provides a supplementary statement suggesting alternative interpretations, it creates a narrative opening. It allows the institution to claim that the incident is ambiguous, that Kate Harrington's actions could be interpreted as protective rather than harmful, that the entire matter is a regrettable misunderstanding rather than deliberate child endangerment. I cannot provide a statement that contradicts my earlier account, Whitmore says. What I observed and what Charlotte told me were clear. Ashford leans back slightly. No one is asking you to contradict yourself, he says. We are asking you to acknowledge complexity. Situations are rarely as simple as they appear. Charlotte may have misunderstood Harrington's intentions. Harrington may have made a procedural error. The motion sensors may have malfunctioned. All of these factors could be true simultaneously. Or Kate Harrington deliberately confined a 9-year-old child in a cold room, Whitmore says. That is also true. Ashford's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. I am going to be direct with you, Commander, he says. The household is prepared to move forward with this investigation in a particular direction. That direction requires cooperation from all involved parties. Your cooperation would be noted appreciated. Your non-cooperation would also be noted. This is the moment. Whitmore recognizes it as such. This is where institutional pressure becomes explicit. This is where the choice becomes visible and undeniable. I have provided my full account, Whitmore says. I will continue to stand by that account. If there are additional questions, I will answer them truthfully. Even if truthfulness damages the household? Ashford asks. Should I continue with part 2? Give me only a single part of each chapter. Chapter 4. Protocol fractures. Whitmore remains in the infirmary corridor while the investigation machinery begins its slow rotation. More officers arrive. The Lord Chamberlain convenes a preliminary inquiry in one of the administrative offices. The palace's internal security network is activated at elevated status, not yet full lockdown, but close enough that staff movements are now being tracked and recorded. At 6:30 a.m., Whitmore is called to provide his formal statement. The Lord Chamberlain sits across from him in the secure office, accompanied by a legal representative from the palace's internal counsel office. A recording device sits on the desk between them. All statements from this point forward will be documented. Walk me through your discovery, Rothwell says. Start from when you first noticed the irregularity. Whitmore provides the timeline. The open door at 3:47 a.m., the access log showing no entry, the motion sensor showing no movement, the decision to investigate personally. He describes the descent into the cellar, the cold air, the rustling sound, the moment he found Charlotte. His account is precise and factual, stripped emotion or interpretation. Why did you not follow standard protocol? Rothwell asks. It is not an accusatory question, simply factual. Why did you not immediately report the irregularity and wait for the incident response team? The anomaly suggested something was actively happening in the cellar, Whitmore says. Standard protocol assumes time for reports to be processed, for teams to be assembled, for procedures to engage. The open door indicated an active breach. I judged that immediate investigation was more appropriate than protocol delay. And you were correct, Rothwell says. Your instinct prevented what could have been a catastrophic outcome. However, your deviation from protocol creates a complication. He pauses, allowing the weight of this statement to settle into the room. Kate Harrington's legal representation will argue that the investigation was compromised by your unauthorized entry into a restricted area, your failure to secure the scene before conducting an assessment, and your presence as a contaminating factor in the evidentiary chain. Rothwell continues. They will claim that anything you discovered cannot be reliably attributed to intentional action by their client, because the scene was not secured by protocol-compliant procedures. Whitmore understands what this means. His instinct to save Charlotte has potentially created a legal vulnerability in prosecuting the person who confined her. At 8 a.m., the household briefing begins. Whitmore is stationed at the corridor access point, outside the conference room, when Kate Harrington arrives. She is dressed impeccably navy suit, pearls, hair precisely styled. Her legal representative walks beside her. They pass through the access point without acknowledging Whitmore, though he notes the brief of her eyes in his direction, assessing. Inside the conference room, the king and queen sit at the head of the table. The Lord Chamberlain, the head of household security, the palace's internal council representative, and the chief administrative officers are arranged around the perimeter. The meeting lasts 43 minutes. Whitmore cannot hear the conversation, but he can track the institutional response officers moving with increased urgency afterward, movements deliberate and cautious, the machinery recalibrating. When Richard Ashford, the head of household security, emerges, he looks directly at Whitmore. "Come with me," he says. In Ashford's office, the conversation begins with careful language. The household has decided to conduct an internal investigation into the incident involving Princess Charlotte. However, there are certain sensitivities involved that require careful handling. What sensitivities? Whitmore asks. Kate Harrington is claiming that Charlotte entered Cellar without authorization, Ashford says. That Harrington discovered her and locked her in to prevent further unauthorized exploration. She is suggesting that Charlotte may have been conducting an unauthorized investigation of the palace, something that does happen occasionally with the royal children. Whitmore's silence is response enough. Charlotte's statement to you indicated that Harrington brought her to the cellar and instructed her to enter the storage room, Ashford continues. Is that accurate, or could it be a paraphrase? Memory can be unreliable in high-stress situations. Officers sometimes reconstruct events in ways that feel accurate but contain subtle inaccuracies. Whitmore recognizes the tactic, the suggestion that his recollection might be flawed, influenced by emotional response to finding a child in danger. My account was documented immediately after the discovery, Whitmore says, while memory was fresh and accurate. The household's counsel has indicated that a more nuanced statement, one that acknowledges the ambiguity in the situation and the possibility of alternative explanations, would be valuable for a thorough investigation. Ashford says carefully. This is the opening, the institutional reframing, the path toward a narrative where deliberate child endangerment becomes a regrettable misunderstanding. I cannot provide a statement that contradicts my earlier account, Whitmore says. What I observed and what Charlotte told me were clear. Ashford leans back. I am going to be direct with you, Commander. The household is prepared to move forward with this investigation in a particular direction. That direction requires cooperation from all involved parties. Your cooperation would be noted and appreciated. Your non-cooperation would also be noted. This is where institutional pressure becomes licit. This is where the choice becomes visible and undeniable. I have provided my full account, Whitmore says. I will continue to stand by that account. If there are additional questions, I will answer them truthfully. Even if truthfulness damages the household? Ashford asks. The infirmary has become a temporary operations center by 5:15 a.m. Dr. Chen has moved Charlotte to a private recovery room, one of 3 designated for sensitive cases. The walls are soft gray, the lighting adjustable, the temperature carefully controlled at a comfortable 21 degrees Celsius. Charlotte's on the bed, wrapped in a thermal blanket, drinking warm tea that Dr. Chen has prepared. She is calm now, or at least appears calm. Whitmore understands that calm at this age is often just numbness, the psychological equivalent of the body's shutdown response to cold. The princess's parents have been notified. They are en route from their private quarters. Protocol dictates that a senior security officer remain present during this interview, but Rothwell has assigned that responsibility to Whitmore. This is unusual. The presence of a command-level guard during a royal family consultation typically signals that the incident is being treated with elevated severity. When the king and queen arrive, they do so with the kind of controlled urgency that comes from maintaining public composure while experiencing private panic. The queen moves directly to Charlotte and embraces her carefully, aware that the child may still be tender from exposure. The king remains by the door, his face carefully neutral, his eyes tracking the room and the people in it. Dr. Chen has confirmed that Charlotte is physically unharmed, Whitmore says, offering the information before being asked. Mild hypothermia, resolved. No injuries or trauma. She is safe. The king nods slowly. How long was she in the cellar? Approximately 4 to 6 hours, Whitmore says. She was placed there between 10 p.m. and midnight. And you discovered her by chance. During routine security monitoring of the access logs, I identified an anomaly, the cellar door standing open, despite no corresponding entry in the access records. I investigated personally and found Charlotte in the storage room. The king's expression does not change, but something shifts in his posture, a slight loosening of tension. Moore recognizes as relief that the discovery was made by a guard rather than being hidden until a later time. The household staff member responsible for this has been identified? The king asks. Kate Harrington, the royal household director, has been confined to her quarters pending investigation, Whitmore says. She initially provided a narrative inconsistent with the physical evidence. The Lord Chamberlain is overseeing the inquiry. Thank you, Commander, the king says. It's a dismissal subtle but clear. I trust the matter is being handled appropriately. It is, sir. Whitmore steps into the corridor, closing the door softly behind him. The infirmary's main office has become a makeshift incident response center. The head of household security, Richard Ashford, is there now, along with 2 other senior officers. They are reviewing access logs, the motion sensor records, the temperature control settings. All of it shows the same pattern. Deliberate action, premeditated confinement, systematic suppression of evidence. Whitmore, Ashford says, acknowledging him. You did well flagging this early. Protocol would have buried it for hours. The irregularities were clear, Whitmore says. It was a matter of following the evidence rather than the standard reporting procedures. Ashford nods, but there is something in his expression that Whitmore recognizes subtles. That there are complications Ashford has not yet shared. The Lord Chamberlain is requesting a full incident reconstruction, Ashford says. He wants your first-hand account of the discovery, your timeline, your reasoning for the investigative choices you made. There will likely be questions from the royal family, possibly from external security authorities. I am prepared to provide that, Whitmore says. There is another consideration, Ashford says. Kate Harrington is claiming that she did not deliberately lock Charlotte in the cellar, and that the thermostat adjustment was made by someone else. She is suggesting that someone deliberately limed her by locking the door after she left the storage room, and that a third party may have manipulated the thermostat. Whitmore processes this. It is a plausible defense, not necessarily true, but plausible enough to create reasonable doubt if the investigation is not thorough. The timeline would need to be verified, Whitmore says. Who had access to the cellar between the time Harrington claims to have left and the time I discovered Charlotte? That is precisely what we are trying to establish, Ashford says. The motion sensors show no one entering the cellar after 11:47 p.m. The access logs show only the single entry from household manager Wells at 4:32 p.m. The only explanation that fits the data is that Harrington herself locked the door and adjusted the thermostat, then deliberately left Charlotte in the room either as punishment or as part of a plan she has not yet revealed. Or the motion sensors malfunctioned, one of the junior officers suggests. All sensors on that line were tested 2 weeks ago, Ashford says. Full functionality confirmed. The sensors worked. No one else entered the cellar. That leaves only Harrington. But Whitmore is thinking about something else, the timing. Charlotte was placed in the cellar between 10 p.m. and midnight, according to her own account. But she was unaccounted for during that window. How long before Whitmore noticed the open door was she already in the cellar? How long did she have to wait, in the cold, in the dark, before rescue arrived? The Lord Chamberlain's office receives Whitmore at 10:15 a.m. Sir Michael Rothwell is reviewing documentation when the guard arrives, and he gestures to the chair across from his desk without looking up from the papers before him. The gesture is efficient, stripped of ceremony, a signal that time is valuable and should not be wasted on formalities. Ashford spoke with you, Rothwell says. It is not a question. He did, Moore confirms. And he suggested that your account might benefit from reinterpretation, Rothwell continues, finally looking up from the documents. He suggested that I provide a supplementary statement acknowledging alternative interpretations. Rothwell sets down his pen. Did you agree to do so? No. Rothwell nods slowly. He stands and walks to the window overlooking the palace gardens. From this vantage point, the grounds appear peaceful manicured lawns, carefully maintained hedge lines, the aesthetic of perfect order maintained by constant, invisible labor. There is a meeting scheduled for this afternoon, Rothwell says, still facing the window. Kate Harrington, her legal representation, myself, the King's private counsel, and the palace's internal counsel. The purpose is to determine the household's official position regarding the incident. That position will determine whether this matter proceeds as a criminal investigation, an internal disciplinary matter, or something else entirely. What do you anticipate the position will be? Whitmore asks. Ambiguity, Rothwell says. The household will likely conclude that the circumstances are unclear, that multiple interpretations are plausible, and that a full investigation would serve no one's interests. Kate Harrington will retain her position, pending what will be described as additional training and oversight. Charlotte will be counseled to be more careful about unauthorized palace exploration. The incident will be classified as resolved. Whitmore processes this. It is exactly what he expected, yet stated aloud by the Lord Chamberlain creates a different weight to the reality. There is another element, Rothwell continues, turning from the window to face Whitmore directly. Kate Harrington has requested access to the full security protocols and key assignments for the wine cellar access. She is claiming that she needs this information to cooperate fully with the investigation, to verify which staff members had capability to manipulate the thermostat and lock the door. She is essentially asking for a complete map of the palace's physical security infrastructure. Whitmore understands immediately what this means. If Harrington obtains that information, she will know exactly which staff members could be implicated or blamed. She will have the ability to identify and potentially protect co-conspirators, or to construct alternative narratives about who might have been responsible. That request has been denied. Whitmore asks. It has been submitted to the head of household security for consideration, Rothwell says, which means Ashford is evaluating whether to grant it. The institutional logic suggests that denying the request appears obstructive, while granting it appears cooperative. Ashford may be inclined toward cooperation. She can find a child, Whitmore says. His voice remains level, but there is something in the words that suggests the facade of professional detachment is beginning to fracture. She deliberately placed a 9-year-old in a cold room and locked the door. The evidence is clear. The evidence is clear to you because you observed the result and spoke with the child immediately, Rothwell says. But institutional evidence is different from factual evidence. Institutional evidence is what can be documented, defended, and sustained through formal procedures. Factual evidence is what you know to be true. The two are not always aligned. Rothwell returns to his desk and sits. He opens one of the documents before him. This is the preliminary investigation report filed by Richard Ashford this morning. In it, he documents that multiple factors could explain the incident: sensor malfunction, accidental door locking, miscommunication regarding the tour, Charlotte's own tendency toward unauthorized exploration. He concludes that while the incident was regrettable, the evidence does not support a determination of deliberate harm. Whitmore reads the report in silence. Every detail he provided has been recontextualized. His observations of the locked door become possibly automatic locking. The thermostat adjustment becomes potentially related to unrelated maintenance. Charlotte's statement becomes a child's possibly inaccurate recollection of events. This will be the official finding? Whitmore asks. This will be the official finding unless something prevents it, Rothwell says. Which is why I am telling you this. You have a choice, Commander. You can accept the institutional narrative and move forward with your career intact. The household appreciates discretion and loyalty. You will likely be promoted within 2 years. Your pension will be secure. Your future will be managed by an institution that values those who understand institutional priorities. Rothwell pauses. The weight of what he is saying settles between them. Or you can continue to insist that your account is accurate and that the institutional narrative is false. In that case, you will be characterized as an officer who cannot distinguish between fact and interpretation. Your reliability will be questioned. Your judgment will be scrutinized, Other incidents from your service record will be examined with increased scrutiny. You will likely be encouraged to seek employment elsewhere. The palace does not retain officers who become problems. Is this a threat? Whitmore asks. It is a description of institutional reality, Rothwell says. I am telling you this because I believe you deserve to understand what choosing truth will cost you. Not everyone does. Not everyone can afford that cost. I do not judge officers who make the institutional choice. I simply believe you should make that choice with full awareness of its consequences. Whitmore stands. He walks to the window and looks out at the same gardens Rothwell was observing moments before. The perfect lawns, the maintained hedge lines, the aesthetic of order maintained by invisible labor and invisible compliance. I will not change my account, he says quietly. I will not accept the institutional narrative. Then you should prepare yourself, Rothwell says, because what comes next will be difficult. The afternoon meeting concludes at 3:47 p.m., exactly 12 hours after Whitmore discovered the open cellar door. He is not present for the meeting, but he hears about it through the corridor conversations that follow. The household has reached a consensus. The incident will be classified as an internal matter. No external authorities will be notified. Kate Harrington will be placed on administrative leave pending a review of her management practices. Charlotte will receive counseling to address any emotional trauma. The matter is resolved. At 4:15 p.m., Whitmore is summoned to a second meeting in the Lord Chamberlain's office. This time, Kate Harrington is present, along with her legal representative, and Sir Michael Rothwell. Whitmore is asked to sit across from Harrington, creating a configuration that suggests this is not an interrogation, but a mediation. Commander Whitmore, Rothwell begins, we have asked you here to review the preliminary findings and to have an opportunity to respond to certain claims that have been made regarding your investigation. Harrington's legal representative speaks first. My client wishes to clarify that she was attempting to facilitate an educational experience for Princess Charlotte. The incident in the cellar was a regrettable miscommunication. My client denies any intentional harm or deliberate confinement. Charlotte stated that you told her to go into the storage room and wait, Whitmore says. His voice remains professional, but there is a firmness to it now, the tone of someone who has moved beyond institutional deference towards something closer to resistance. My client explained that she was directing Charlotte to the storage area as part of a household inventory tour. The legal representative responds. The automatic door lock was an equipment failure, not intentional action. The thermostat was deliberately lowered to 8 degrees Celsius, Whitmore says. That is not an equipment failure. That is a deliberate action requiring manual adjustment. That adjustment may have been made by another staff member, the legal representative suggests. The cellar is a common access point for multiple household employees. The motion sensors show no one else entered the cellar, Whitmore says. Only Kate Harrington accessed the cellar area between times to have left and the time I discovered Charlotte. Rothwell raises his hand slightly, a gesture requesting that Whitmore pause. The question before us is not whether an incident occurred, Rothwell says carefully. The question is whether the incident was intentional or accidental. Whether it was a regrettable procedural failure or a deliberate act of harm. It was deliberate, Whitmore says. The evidence supports this conclusion. The evidence supports multiple conclusions, Harrington's legal representative counters. Which is precisely why the household has determined that an internal resolution is appropriate. A full investigation would require scrutiny of numerous staff members, examination of security protocols, and extensive documentation. All of this would inevitably become public knowledge. The household believes that such a public proceeding would damage the institution far more than the incident itself. Whitmore understands now what is actually happening in this meeting. This is not a proceeding to determine truth. This is a negotiation regarding narrative management. The household is attempting to persuade him to accept the official interpretation in exchange for institutional reward and protection. The king and queen are grateful for your diligence in discovering Charlotte, Rothwell says, his voice taking on a warmer, more conciliatory tone. They have asked me to convey their appreciation. There is a commendation being prepared for your file. Additionally, there is discussion of an advancement opportunity, a senior position in the Royal Security Detail, if you are interested. This is the institutional offer. Career advancement in exchange for complicity. Cannot accept advancement based on circumstances involving a deliberately harmed child, Whitmore says. No one is asking you to accept advancement based on that, Rothwell says smoothly. The advancement is being offered in recognition of your diligence in identifying the security anomaly. Your actions prevented a worse outcome. That is commendable, regardless of how the incident is ultimately classified. Whitmore recognizes the rhetorical construction. The offer is being presented as separate from the institutional pressure, as though accepting it would not constitute complicity with the narrative that is being constructed around Charlotte's confinement. I will not participate in a false account of what occurred, Whitmore says. Harrington leans forward slightly. For the first time, she speaks directly, her voice calm and controlled. Commander Whitmore, you are a professional. You understand institutional dynamics. You understand that institutions require a certain degree of discretion to function effectively. What you discovered was unpleasant. What you believe about my actions may even be accurate. But what you believe and what the household sustain as institutional truth are not the same thing. Charlotte knows what happened, Whitmore says. She experienced it directly. Charlotte is 9 years old, Harrington responds. She is frightened, possibly confused, and her recollection of events is vulnerable to suggestion and reinterpretation. She has also been informed by household counsel that the matter is being handled appropriately and that she should focus on her recovery rather than dwelling on details that may be unclear or subject to multiple interpretations. Rothwell stands abruptly. His expression has changed. Something colder has entered, a shift from mediator to enforcer. I think we have explored this territory adequately, he says. Commander Whitmore, you have made your position clear. The household has made its position clear. There is a fundamental disagreement regarding how this incident should be classified and managed. Rothwell walks to the door and opens it. The gesture is clear. This meeting is over. However, Rothwell continues as Whitmore stands to leave. You should understand that your continued insistence on an alternative narrative will be interpreted as institutional disloyalty. The household is a closed system. Those who function effectively within it understand certain unwritten protocols. Those who do not, those who prioritize external narratives over institutional coherence tend to find their positions untenable. Are you telling me I will be terminated if I do not accept the household's narrative? Whitmore asks. I am telling you that institutions protect themselves, Rothwell says. And that self-protection often involves managing personnel who become complications. Whether that management takes the form of termination, reassignment, or other measures depends on various factors. But the outcome is generally the same for officers who cannot align themselves with institutional priorities. Whitmore pauses at the threshold. He looks back at Harrington, who is watching him with an expression of careful neutrality. He understands now that Harrington's actions were never primarily about Charlotte. They were about establishing a certain kind of power, the power to act with impunity, to harm with protection, to operate within the institution, knowing that the institution would shield her from external accountability. And the institution is shielding her, not because the facts support her innocence, but because acknowledging her guilt would create complications that the institution prefers to avoid. I will file a supplementary report, Whitmore says quietly, documenting my concerns regarding the institutional response to this incident. You are certainly entitled to do so, Rothwell says. His tone suggests that such a report would be filed, read, and then carefully archived in a manner that ensures it creates minimal disruption to the institutional machinery. Whitmore leaves the office. He walks through the palace corridors in the late afternoon light, and he understands now that something fundamental has shifted. He is no longer simply a guard employed by the household. He is now an officer who has seen the institution's capacity for self-protection and chosen not to participate in it. That choice has consequences. Those consequences are beginning to manifest. He returns to the observation deck and sits at the desk where this entire situation began. The monitors show the palace in its evening routine, staff moving through designated corridors, security systems functioning normally, everything appearing as though the institution operates with perfect integrity. Whitmore knows now what lies beneath that appearance. He knows about the thermostat deliberately lowered. He knows about the child left in the cold. He knows about the institution's willingness to construct a false narrative rather than acknowledge that someone within the inner circle caused harm. And he knows that his refusal to participate in that false narrative, he can no longer truly be part of this institution. Whitmore begins the process at 6:30 p.m., after the day's shift transitions to evening operations. He does not use the palace's internal communication system. Instead, he leaves the observation deck, exits through the east security corridor, and drives to the external palace security oversight office, located in a government building 3 kilometers from the palace grounds. The External Security Authority, the ESA, operates independently from the household's internal apparatus. Theory: independence ensures that institutional matters can be reviewed without the complications of internal loyalty or hierarchical pressure. In practice, the ESA maintains a delicate relationship with the palace. Most investigations are resolved quietly, with minimal public disruption. Most officers who escalate household matters to external oversight find that their cooperation is appreciated, but their future employment within the palace becomes complicated. Whitmore understands this as he sits in the ESA's intake office, describing the incident to an investigator named Margaret Torres. Torres, in her 50s, with the bearing one who has spent her career managing institutional complications. She listens without interrupting, taking notes, asking clarifying questions only when necessary. "You are aware that this report will initiate a formal investigation," Torres says when Whitmore has finished. "An investigation that the palace will view as external intrusion into internal matters." "I am aware," Whitmore says. "And you are prepared for the institutional consequences of that escalation." "I am." Torres sets down her pen. "I need to ask you something directly, Commander. Are you certain of your account? Because once this goes external, the palace's legal machinery will engage. Kate Harrington will mount a defense. The institutional narrative will solidify. There will be pressure on you to reconsider details, or to accept alternative interpretations. Are you certain enough to withstand that pressure?" "I am certain," Whitmore says. Torres nods slowly. She begins the official documentation process, recording Whitmore's statement, requesting authorization to access palace security logs, initiating the formal investigation protocol that will require the palace to respond to external inquiry. The process takes 90 minutes. By 8 p.m., the External Security Authority has officially assumed investigative jurisdiction over the incident. Whitmore receives a preliminary notice that he will be required to provide additional testimony, that his role as the primary discoverer of the victim makes him a key witness, and that he should expect contact from ESA investigators within 48 hours. He returns to the palace at 8:45 p.m. The evening staff shifts are in full operation. The corridors are quieter than during day hours, but still occupied with personnel completing their assigned duties. Whitmore moves through them with a sense of finality, understanding that his presence in these corridors, his participation in this institutional system, may soon be ending. At 9:15 p.m., he receives notification that he is being relieved from duty pending an internal investigation into whether his actions, specifically his decision to escalate matters to external oversight without going through the household chain of command, constitute a breach of protocol and a violation of his employment agreement. The notification is delivered by Richard Ashford, the head of household security, who summons Whitmore to his office and presents the directive in writing. Whitmore reads it carefully. The language is precise and institutional, but the meaning is clear. He has been suspended from active duty, his security clearance is being reviewed, and his continued employment is now under evaluation. "You should have come to me before escalating to the ESA," Ashford says, his tone carrying a particular blend of disappointment and warning. "You should have allowed the household's internal process to complete its course." "The household's internal process was designed to suppress the investigation," Whitmore says, "to protect Kate Harrington rather than determine accountability." "The household's internal process was designed to manage a complicated situation in a manner that serves everyone's interests," Ashford responds, "including the royal family's interests, which ultimately include yours. You have now created a situation where external oversight will examine household protocols, security procedures, and personnel files. That examination will reveal other complications. It will create institutional disruption that serves no one." "It serves Charlotte," Whitmore says. "It serves the truth." Ashford sets down the directive. "Truth is a luxury that institutions cannot always afford," he says quietly. "You are a talented officer, Whitmore. You have 7 years of exemplary service. That service could have concluded with advancement and security. Instead, you chose to be a complication. The household does not retain complications." Whitmore is escorted from the palace at 10 p.m. His security badge is deactivated. His access codes are revoked. He is instructed that he is not to return to the palace grounds pending the outcome of the internal investigation. He leaves in civilian clothes, his official duties suspended indefinitely. The following morning, the external security begins its formal investigation. Investigators interview palace staff members. They examine security logs, thermostat records, access documentation. They conduct a preliminary mental assessment of Charlotte, which confirms the timeline Whitmore provided evidence consistent with 4 to 6 hours of exposure to cold temperatures, physical findings that support Charlotte's account of deliberate confinement. Most significantly, they obtain a formal statement from the King and Queen, who confirm that Charlotte was placed in their care by household staff, and that they did not authorize any cellar exploration or inventory assessment. They support the investigative process and indicate their willingness to cooperate fully with external oversight. This royal cooperation is the factor that changes the institutional calculus. When the monarchy explicitly supports an investigation, the household's capacity to suppress it becomes severely limited. The institutional machinery shifts. The narrative begins to crack. By day 3 of the external investigation, the ESA has sufficient evidence to recommend criminal charges against Kate Harington for child endangerment, unlawful confinement, and attempted institutional obstruction. The recommendation goes to the district prosecutor's office, which accepts it and initiates formal legal proceedings. Kate Harington is arrested at her residence on the morning of day 4. She is escorted from the palace grounds by law enforcement officers, her legal representation accompanying her. The arrest is processed outside palace's jurisdiction, in the civil legal system, where institutional protection cannot insulate her from accountability. Whitmore learns about the arrest from news coverage rather than institutional communication. He is sitting in his apartment, suspended from duty, and waiting for the outcome of the internal investigation when he sees the report. Kate Harington has been charged. She has posted bail. She has retained a private legal defense firm. The case will proceed through the civil court system. On day 7, Whitmore receives a summons to provide testimony before the district prosecutor's office. His account, the discovery of the door, the finding of Charlotte, the conversation with the child becomes the foundation of the state's case against Harington. His testimony is detailed and precise. He does not elaborate or interpret. He simply provides facts and lets those facts construct their own narrative. The prosecutor asks him directly, "In your professional assessment, was Princess Charlotte deliberately confined?" "Yes," Whitmore says. The evidence supports only that conclusion. Despite the household's narrative suggesting accidental confinement, the household's narrative is inconsistent with the physical evidence, the access logs, the thermostat adjustment, and Charlotte's direct account of events. Whitmore says, "I cannot support a conclusion that contradicts that evidence." 2 weeks after Whitmore's escalation to external oversight, the case against Kate Harington proceeds toward trial. The prosecution has sufficient evidence to pursue felony charges. The defense has mounted a vigorous challenge, but the physical facts remain. A child deliberately confined, a thermostat deliberately lowered, a door deliberately locked. Charlotte, with her parents' support, has provided a formal statement to law enforcement. She has been prepared by trauma specialists to understand that her testimony may be required in court proceedings. She has been assured that the legal system will protect her, that her account has value, and that truth matters. On the day the case is formally docketed for trial, Whitmore is formally notified that his internal investigation has concluded. The household has determined that his escalation, external oversight constituted a breach of protocol, a violation of his employment agreement, and an act of institutional disloyalty. He is being terminated, effective immediately. His pension will be processed. His final compensation will be calculated. He is no longer an employee of the palace. Whitmore reads the notification in his apartment, and he understands that this outcome was inevitable from the moment he chose truth over institutional protection. His career in palace service has ended. His position within the institution has been permanently closed. But Charlotte is safe. The investigation is proceeding through legitimate channels. The truth is moving through a system that no authority figure can quietly close. Kate Harington will face criminal accountability. The institution's capacity to protect her from external consequences has been severed. Whitmore walks to his window and looks out at the city beyond his apartment. Somewhere in the palace, there are officers moving through corridors, completing their duties, maintaining the institutional machinery. Somewhere in the residential quarters, Charlotte is beginning the process of recovery, supported by her family and by the legal system's acknowledgement that what happened to her, deliberate and wrong. Whitmore is no longer part of the palace apparatus. He is no longer a guard. He is simply an officer who saw a child in danger, chose to act, and chose to stand by that action even when it cost him everything the institution had offered. He does not know what comes next. He does not know what employment will be available to him, or how other institutions will view his decision to escalate palace matters to external oversight. He does not know if his career in security work can continue, or if he has permanently marked himself as unreliable from an institutional perspective. But he knows that Charlotte was found. He knows that the truth moved forward. He knows that he stood at the threshold where institutional loyalty conflicted with human duty, and he chose the latter. Whatever comes next, that choice remains clean.